Stacey the Black Feather Intuitive, and welcome to another Crime Chronicles crossover with my fellow host, Mark Jones. Mark, you've been amazing in helping me to explore and spread my true crime psychic wings. And I reached out to you, a few weeks ago and said, hey, I would love to do a crossover about Madeleine McCann. Would you like to connect? And you graciously said, yeah, give me a couple of weeks to do a little research and we'll hop on a call. So that is what brings us today. Hi, Mark. Grateful to be doing this with you today.
Well, thank you, Stacey. Interesting case. Sad, but interesting.
Very sad. Very, very sad. I remember a couple of years ago when the Netflix special came out, that's how I found out about it. And just watching that, it was like a mini series or a limited series, and being horrified and at the same time getting a lot of just kind of psychic hits. But it was before I felt comfortable enough to throw my hat in the ring in a public way to give some guidance on it. So why don't you get our watchers up to speed on some of the particulars of the case?
Well, I'll try, but like I said, if there are gaps to fill in or exact dates, somebody please jump in and add that. But again, I don't recall exact dates, but it happened in 2007 in the Algarve region of Portugal, the very southern tip of Portugal. And that may have been a factor only because it's the southernmost point in Europe where the Moroccan border is just across the Strait of Gibraltar, because there was some suspicion that Madeleine McCann was taken to Morocco, but that pretty much disappeared. This British couple was on holiday. They're both physicians, very well educated, but not extremely wealthy. These are upper middle class Brits. And they were at a resort that was frequented by other European or British tourists in Portugal, in southern Portugal. And they were out at dinner. There were several other couples or families, and about 4 couples were on this joint holiday together. They left their 3 children, their apartment where they were staying. And although, a lot of, people in hindsight have said, well, gee, how could you have done that? By what I have read, which granted it's not everything, I wasn't there, they didn't do anything that most any other couple, including the couples they were with, did as well. All of the couples left their children in their apartments, and one of the couples, one person from the group, went and checked on all the children every 30 minutes. And then supposedly another man who was in the party with them, they call these people the tapas 7 because they were at a restaurant in Portugal that specialized in tapases, Portuguese and Spanish snack meals. Well, this man went back to check on the McCann children at, I believe, about 8:30. Again, I could be wrong with the time, or maybe it was 9:30, I'm not sure. And he went into the room where the children were staying and noticed that some windows and or doors may have been cracked or left ajar, left open. And he closed them, but he didn't go by and look personally to see if Madeleine McCann was in her bed. And so the next time it came time for somebody to go and check on the children, Madeleine McCann's mother went, and that's when she discovered that Madeleine was missing, but her other 2 children were in the room and okay and asleep. So she disappears, and naturally they panic, and the staff at the resort where they were staying starts initiating searches in the middle of the night, and the Portuguese police are the first ones called. The Portuguese police had come under a lot of fire because of the way they handled the case. The crime scene was compromised. Other proper authorities were not notified until several hours later. But again, this is it's easy to be an armchair detective in a case like this. This usually happens with these things. The Portuguese authorities went on the lookout for the bad guys, the bogeymen who might have done something like this. But as also always happens, they were also had one eye on police doing situations like this. They had one eye outward, looking at people, the stranger abduction, that type of thing, all the while keeping a suspicious eye on the parents or the people closest to Madeleine McCann, which would be the 2 parents and the other parents in this group that they were with. And again, we can get to a lot of detail here, but this was played out in the European press, really throughout the world, but especially in the British press, and the Portuguese press, and other European outlets. And the McCanns became the object of suspicion, as one might guess. And pretty much anyone and everyone who may have been in the area at one time came under suspicion, including some of the people that they were with that night. And one of the suspicions, in fact, the Portuguese police came to the initial conclusion that somehow she had died in an accident inside the hotel room, and the parents covered it up by disposing of her body. Not to get too far ahead, I reject that. If for no other reason, that if that had been the case, then one of the other people in this group would have eventually coughed up that information, and that never happened.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, child abductions of this sort by a stranger are extremely rare. The vast majority of children who are abducted throughout the world are abducted or harmed by someone they know or someone close to them or a relative or a parent. But this, since there was no one else around them, around the child, who was fit that bill of being close to them, it wouldn't have been a relative or a friend or that type of thing, most likely. So that's where it was hanging. And this case has never been solved. There have been a number of suspects named over the years from several different countries, a lot of whom were convicted sex offenders, but most of them have been cleared because there's no evidence connecting them to this case. And there've been lawsuits left and right filed by people who have been defamed by the British press, most of the British press. It really boiled down to right now, there is one lead suspect to this day, a man named Christian Bruckner, a German, a convicted rapist and pedophile who served time for raping a 72-year-old woman, 72 or 73 years old, and has been accused of other crimes as well. And he was released from that crime, and despite efforts to keep him locked up by German police and others. And he was also granted permission to leave the country, to leave Germany. So that's pretty much where the case is now, as far as I know. This guy's still the lead suspect, but we're not even really sure where he is, and no one's ever been charged with this case.
Now, there's two things you guys said, unfortunate and sad. And the word I have is annoyance. And I'm speaking as some of these people that were outraged. Not outraged at the police. Like you said, we always armchair, hey, this should have been done, because everybody's a CSI expert, right? My part is annoyance is, how many videos and cases do we need to see before people stop leaving their kids alone for any determined amount of time when they're of a certain age? When they're 3, when they're 5, yes, even if they're coming back every 30 minutes, every 20 minutes and all of that, because as we know, it takes a split second. When I last worked on Fort Hood, I had to teach somebody a lesson the hard way. I came into work and there's a little girl sitting in the back of a car. Walk up to the car and I said, roll down the window. She rolled down the window and she jumped in my arms and I took her into the dental clinic. And I sat by the door and I waited 15 minutes and her father came walking back with a tire iron because they got a flat tire. And he's looking around the car frantic. And I could have said something then, but I said, I'm going to let him be frantic, whether right or wrong, for about a good 2 minutes. And then I finally called him over and I said, hey, are you looking for your daughter? Yeah, she's in the clinic with the nurse. And I said, before you go, I said, don't leave your kid alone. Well, I'm just running down the street. I'm a grown man. It took me 2 seconds to get your daughter out of that car.
Yeah.
And that's the problem I have. Your number one goal as parents is protection of your kids. And what seems like 5 minutes running into the store, 7 minutes to go pick up something from the hairdresser, and all it takes is a split second for that little kid to be snatched away. And that's why I get annoyed. And, there's people that are like, well, they were checking on them. And 20 minutes is a long time when you're 3 years old.
Let me just argue back a little bit. Yeah, I mean, how can you argue against the example you gave there with leaving the child in the car? I don't recall, I did read this, the proximity of where these parents were in relation to the children was, and I'm really just raising a question, really, because you do make a good point, absolutely. But were they so close to the children that they didn't really feel as if they were, quote, leaving them alone? Now, again, that may not make much sense the way I'm saying that, but
it is, Mark. I know what you're saying, and you're right. And it's also the place. Sometimes you're in a place where you feel like the security is better, especially if you're, let's say, we've got a crap ton of money and we're staying in a place that's highly secure. But then it happens there as well. I'm just saying there's never a time your kid doesn't have at least the teen in the age where you should be leaving them unsupervised for that amount of time. Because, I mean, look where we're at.
Well, one thing they were criticized for was not so much, going out to dinner with their friends and leaving the children, and the children of the other families, couples were left alone as well.
Mhm.
I think there were, say, 8 children total that were left alone in various places. But they were criticized because people said, look, there were babysitters available.
Yeah.
I've been to,
and they have the money for that.
Very much, because you don't trust the babysitter either sometimes. But I've been to places where we left our children alone in a hotel room, but with a babysitter or someone.
But if you at least have somewhere to start. If you left them with a babysitter, that's at least we can start with the babysitter. And then the reason why, and I'm going to get out of you guys' here, I just wanted to say this part. The reason being because you give a timeline every 20 to 30 minutes, but when you're out eating or having a couple glasses of wine, sometimes you think you haven't been back there in 20 minutes and it's been
Yeah,
35 minutes. So
right.
it's,
That's true.
and I'm not saying they did that, but it's just like it to me as a kid who was left alone because my parents didn't have the money and they both had to go to work. Me and my sister at 6 and 7 sometimes would be at home for a very long time in a very bad neighborhood. And luckily, anytime I went towards that door, my sister would literally sit on me for
Yeah.
hours so that I didn't go out the door. But that's if she wasn't there, I'd be out the door. That's all
I
I
would
want.
say
I just want to say that.
it's a cautionary tale, from that perspective. It doesn't really, I mean, obviously it affects the case from the perspective of that child would not have been kidnapped had there been parental supervision. But it's a cautionary tale. But for all the things that you guys just brought up, I can tell you what the mother was thinking. The mother was thinking, we're in a safe place. We're in a resort that we've been to many times before. We know the staff. We are close to, we're on a resort. We are close to our rooms, and there's safety in numbers. That's what they were thinking. There's safety in numbers. Nobody's going to come in to the apartment and cause harm to one of the kids when there are 8 of them there. Like, it was that kind of mentality. And just, we're all on vacation, so let's just go and do vacation things. There was a false sense of safety, a false sense of security, and a lot of parents, I feel, have run into that. So having said that, moving forward with the case now, it's fascinating to me that it hasn't been solved after all of these years when there have been so many suspects and they follow different leads. I remember just vaguely, Mark, and maybe you can comment on this, there was a witness that saw a man carrying a child in a nightgown in the middle of the night walking down the street. And the person remembered, when they went to the police about it, they said they thought it was a bit odd, but it looked kind of like a father carrying his daughter. And so maybe they were, somewhere else and she was sleeping and now he's taking her home to her bed. But I remember the person saying that they regretted so deeply not questioning the father or the man that was carrying the child when they found it really odd. And when I was watching the whole miniseries, that is the thing that sticks out the most to me as being the critical point where that was her. They could have stopped all of this. They could have saved her in that moment. And I don't remember the timing around that, but I remember like exactly in the documentary, but I do remember it being like within a 30-minute-ish window where it made sense that that was her, but because there were no cameras, there was no one else that could, vouch. The person didn't get a good look at the person's face because I believe he was wearing something, like a hoodie or whatever. So it didn't get a good look at the man's face, just remembered the child being held in pajamas in a nightgown in this person's arms. And very random and very rare, right? Like, the kid has no shoes, pulled out of bed, this guy is walking down the street with her in that, just in plain sight, ever emboldened in that. Did you come across any of that, Mark, in your
I think there were 2 so-called sightings like this. Now, the 2 people who had this sighting or sightings, they may have been looking at the same man. Now, one of the sightings, I'm not sure if it's the one you're referring to or not, but one of the sightings of a man carrying a child was by one of the women in that group, the friends of the McCanns. She reported looking and seeing a man carrying a child that loosely fits your description as far as, maybe the child was wearing pajamas or something like that. And then I believe there was another sighting by another woman who was walking down a very narrow street and saw something like this.
That's the one I remember.
Yeah, and in both cases, the women said that this person looked a little out of place, did not look like an affluent tourist. But the authorities, and there were so many leads like this, but the authorities investigated these leads and concluded they were unfounded. But again, I mean, the child didn't just disappear. In one case, they thought, well, yes, a woman did see this, but what she thought didn't look right, didn't pass the smell test. It turns out it's probably another man. This was a resort, a man carrying his daughter down the street. In one case, the physical description of the man was given, but at least according to the Portuguese police, it didn't lead anywhere. And now, speaking of Portuguese police, something else kind of reared its ugly head here. It almost gets to the point where the police start to forget, but they start to kind kind of lose focus of what's important. And in this case, they start fighting each other. And that was the Portuguese police and the British police, because the British were called in, even though they didn't have jurisdiction. But since they were
Right.
British
British
citizens,
citizens.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Portuguese government was doing the British police the courtesy of allowing them to come in. And the Portuguese police were annoyed at the British police, and this is where, I guess, kind of, for lack of a better word, nationalistic prejudice in history enters into play, because they thought that the British police kind of looked down on them and were being, in their words, imperialistic. And so that kind of thing starts to get in the way too. And the Portuguese police got incredibly annoyed at you might say, well, go with the feeling, but at the amount of press this case generated. And it was generated in large measure by the British government, the British police, and the McCann family, because they were doing all they could to locate the child. And so they got some assistance from some very wealthy Brits, including Simon Cowell and Richard Branson. And who's the woman who wrote the Harry Potter books? Okay.
Oh, sure. Oh my God, why can't I think of her name?
J.K.
You just
Yeah.
Rowling.
said that. Yes, J.K.
Right.
Rowling.
Yeah. Yeah, these people were donating money left and right, and then some anonymous sources too, to assist in the investigation. And the Portuguese police seemed to feel that kind of got in the way of what they were trying to do. So it just got to be a mess legally and in terms of the media. And then there were lawsuits filed over the years left and right, because this person was implicated or accused or named as a suspect, and their reputations were ruined. And so they sued and won money, and then and rulings were reversed and then reinstated and so forth. It got the publicity surrounding the case and the drama involving alleged suspects or the actions of police officers or the actions of the media. That took on a life of its own, which was a huge distraction to trying to find who actually did abduct this little girl. And then at some point, the German police stepped in and said, we have a guy here who we really think we should take a look at. And to this day, the German police believe that it is this German national named Christian Bruckner.
Okay, so a couple things that I want to just tune into psychically. I want to tap into the sighting of the man holding the child in her nightgown. I'd like to tap into what effect the disgruntlement between the two police agencies had on that. And I think that's really interesting. I definitely want to tap into the German man. So I don't know what the description was of the individual, but when I tap in psychically to the person who was holding the little girl, I do see a hoodie, but the psychic is giving me more information, and I'm getting kind of a medium brown hair, a bit of thicker hair, but wore it kind of shaved. I feel like a scar in the head, like a wound of some kind where the hair didn't grow. I'm seeing lighter eyes, bluer eyes. I'm seeing a crooked nose, like a broken nose, someone who has had probably a surgery or something. I'm seeing boxing, so quite possibly someone who had broken noses through actual boxing, because I'm seeing the boxing gloves. Something also kind of funky on his right hand. Feels like a pinky finger, something odd about the pinky finger, either a misshapen or had an injury to the finger, something along those lines. I'm seeing someone who was maybe between 5'10" and 6 feet. I'm definitely feeling that even though the police sort of investigated this and found these sightings to be unfounded, I don't feel that way at all. My whole body just lights up when I tap into this person's energy, and I'm definitely feeling that was actually Madeleine McCann. And I'm feeling also like I'm seeing that he removed her from the bed, and I feel like there was some kind of medication administered already. Feels like maybe like we do cough medicine to help put us to sleep, right? Like all the tricks to not have sleeping pills and things like that. I don't know if that was the parents that did that or if something was administered to the child after he picked her up. But I do feel that she was not completely awake. She was not fully conscious. I don't feel that any physical harm had come to her, but I do feel that something, a pill or cough medicine or something was taken to cause her to feel extra drowsy. So she was just already kind of out of it. I see that when he left the resort room, I keep seeing a left and then a left. And it's kind of like he went left out of the resort area. I see a lot of like cobblestone kind of street stuff where he walked a certain distance, and I'm seeing the number 3. I feel like he walked about 3 blocks before he got into his vehicle. It feels like not a station wagon, but like maybe like a hatchback or something like that. A vehicle put her in the back seat and drove away. But I keep seeing left. I don't know what direction that was from the resort, but like left and then left out of the resort. It's heartbreaking for me to feel into this because the people saw this person, and if somebody had only gone up to this person and questioned him, I feel like things could have, sort of stopped. But I mean, it is what it is. She's been gone for so long. Let's get into the discrepancy between the two police agencies. I'm seeing that the Portuguese police actually dropped the ball on something, and they knew that they had dropped the ball. So they were already coming in feeling defensive. And then when the Brits came in, it feels like their defenses were already up. And then there was like a personality clash between two detectives. I feel like they were similar in their personalities. And so, sometimes when we're similar, we can kind of butt heads. And so I do feel that directly affected the efficacy of the investigation, that they, rather than working together, they were kind of working. It's like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? They were both wanting to be right, rather than really, kind of putting all of their pride aside and just really getting to the heart of the matter. But I do see that the Portuguese police did drop the ball on a particular aspect of the investigation. And as a result of that, they were already behind the 8 ball and defensive about it. And that just created more opportunity for there to be conflict. I do also feel like there was a lead that maybe this was where they dropped the ball. There was a lead that they didn't get to in time. And when they started to investigate the lead, they actually found something to it, but it was something that if they were to have been honest and admitted to it, they would have had to have admitted that they could have stopped this situation, kind of out of turn. But I feel like that's kind of buried. I don't know that that'll ever come to light. It's really quite sad too, because I feel like, again, I'm getting the number 3. I feel like she was basically within 3 hours, she was like gone. Like they would not have been able to find her. But within that 3-hour window, they would have been able to stop this. There were a number of, I want to say, crosses, people crossing paths, seeing things that, can connect the dots. Within about 3 hours, they had about 3 hours to be able to solve the issue, but it didn't go so well. What was the third thing, Mark, that I said I was going to tap into? You had just talked about it.
So the rivalry between the police.
The German guy.
Yeah.
So I do feel that he was in the area at the time of her disappearance. I see him being connected to a pedophile. Pedo. I probably shouldn't say the word.
Yeah, we keep saying the whole word and saying the R word.
Yeah. So pedo, a group. I'm not saying a ring. I'm not talking about a trafficking ring. I'm talking about a group of individuals who share a common interest and know about one another. And it's a very, sort of tight-knit, secretive type group for obvious reasons. And I feel like he was in the area and there was another individual that's part of this group that he's a part of that was also in the area at the time. What I'm not clear on, based on what I'm getting, is whether, like, I keep feeling like the one didn't want to share with the other. And when I tap into I think you said his name was Christian Bruckner or something.
Yeah.
What was his name? Yeah.
You got it. Yeah, that's right.
I feel really strongly that he was directly connected. If he fits the description that I just received, then we've made the connection. We've connected the dots. If he doesn't fit that description, I feel like it's like he was in the area, he knew about this other person, but it's almost like we're frenemies. Like we both are into the same thing, but we maybe don't want to share. So it's kind of like a little competition. Who gets to do the thing first? It's very, very sick energy. But I feel almost like a competitive sort of energy. I don't feel that one would rat out the other. I feel that this was obviously not his first time. We know that because the police already validated that or verified that. He's continued to behave in that manner. And I'm getting the number 17 around him. 17. I don't know exactly what that is, but it feels like I'm seeing it in big numbers, almost like on a jersey or something. Like
Could be
the
17.
number feels like it identifies him in some way, or he identifies with the number 17 in some way, and not in like a generic way, something that is more personal to him. I don't know if there's any research on that at all or not, but I'm just getting that 17. I do feel that the German police have made their theory based on a lot of similar connecting evidence, like based on this pedo's pattern. The crime kind of fits the pattern. The look of poor Madeleine fits his profile, kind of fits his preferences. And I see that she was taken into a home that had not exactly a basement, but like like a half basement, like a cellar, like a root cellar, where it's not like the whole bottom of the house, but it's at the base of the part of a house. It feels like a root cellar. And I feel like she didn't stay there for a long time. I feel like she stayed there for a temporary period of time. Horrible things happened, and then I feel that she was moved.
Did the German guy live there, Mark, or he was vacationing?
I think the answer would be transient more than the two options you just
Yeah,
mentioned.
that's what makes it difficult. It could be a case of him.
Yeah,
Sometimes-
if a transit's involved, that means there's no connection because you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
This
It's
guy
like
had
no home address.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, or you don't know. I mean, he has no prior connection to the victim.
Right.
As
And
well.
then it's also sometimes you're a thief and you end up in the same place where the bank is being robbed.
Well, and the police
Something else is coming through. Sorry, I just don't want to lose this. I feel, okay. I see him walking in a water-filled area, kind of a beach-like area. I don't know if this resort was on a beach or if there was just pools, but I'm seeing him walking on a beach-like area, and I see him zoning in on her. He looked for an opportunity. It wasn't a crime of opportunity, and I feel that he chose her, and then he waited until he found the right opportunity. And I feel like it was 2 days. So he saw her, and 2 days later, this occurred. So it was premeditated, but he looked for his opportunity. He watched, he observed what the family did. He observed the family's behaviors, and it became very evident to him that this would be easy. It would be an easy kidnapping. Sorry, Mark, to cut you off.
No,
Sometimes
you're
I'll
fine.
lose it if
That's
I don't
okay.
spit it out.
You're fine. So it was a beach resort. And that's
Yeah.
one of the problems that I have
Oh.
because the room that they were at has 2 accessible floors that are access to the public. I hate staying in places where the public has, of course, your front door if people are going to walk by, but their sliding door that led to the ocean is publicly accessible. That's one issue. But what I was getting to was, sometimes you're the thief that gets in the vicinity of a bank robbing happened. The reason why I push back like you did, Mark, on people thinking was there's something that happened in the apartment and the parents are covering up is in that span of time, there's nowhere where are they hiding her.
Right.
Because
And-
then immediately
and
when
then the idea that the other parents would be complicit in this, that
Yeah.
makes it pretty far fetched.
yeah, because it went into a full-blown search like immediately. It's 2 things with the guy with the kid. Because at first when I watched the Netflix, but before the Netflix, I knew about the case. I thought, okay, if the guy with the kid was the abductor and that was her, and Stacy put in there that she felt there was some type of drug. I didn't even think about that. I thought, well, that kid's comfortable with that guy, and I know that a lot of times these happen. It's someone that they're comfortable with or a friend of the family. So I was like, what if it's one of the parents, the males that walked by and did something? But again, in that span of time, where would they put her that she wouldn't be found? They didn't have enough time to put her somewhere. And then people would say, well, maybe they threw her in the ocean because it's a beach resort. Well, if you know anything about an ocean, you got to go out into the ocean to get rid of a body. You can't just throw it off to the ocean. The tide's going to bring it right back in. So that's the things that help me kind of eliminate parents because, and I don't blame people for thinking that we've seen the Casey Anthony case. How many cases have we seen where the parent was involved or suspected involved and it just doesn't sit right? But I can't find anything that says you're looking criminally, Stacey's looking psychically. I'm just looking at it and nothing in my common sense radar says says it was the parents that did it or anyone in that party.
Yeah, I don't feel that at all.
The transient guy makes it hard for me because, again, not having the resources to get that body away fast enough, and he didn't leave the area. So I'm thinking stranger, nabbed, gone. Just
I mean, it really is. I mean, we say mystery. It really is a mystery because, yeah. And another thing, they say that, well, we suspect there were two guys lurking around, Well, I just don't. The way the sex offenders of that type operate, two men get together and say, hey, let's decide on abducting this one girl. It just really doesn't add up to me. And then you have, oh, I saw two men over there and they looked suspicious. They were talking about something and, so forth. I just don't believe that's the way this would go. It's one thing worth noting, though, because I think you mentioned something along these lines, is that I was watching a 60 Minutes Australia story about this case. And another woman that this guy was charged with sexually assaulting, I hope we can say that one, Irish woman who was on holiday. I forgot where it was. And he was covered, almost his entire face was covered except his eyes. Yeah, she could still identify him. She still swore that this was the right guy. And he was on trial for doing something similar to a 70-something-year-old woman. Mm-hmm. So this guy was a bad actor. But again, both Portuguese and British police have fingered a whole lot of suspects. And in every case, it turns out, oh, sorry, we were wrong.
And normally, Mark,
very possible that's the case with this fella too.
And tell me if I'm wrong, Mark. Normally with offenders, there's a consistency in age range. You won't get a very huge gap. Like it's not a 60-year-old they assaulted and then a 5-year-old and then a 15-year-old. It's usually kids, teens, blondes, brunettes, tall women, short women, plus size women. It's usually they have a certain thing that they always look for. Now, I do feel with Stacy saying that this person may know of the person, I feel like because these people kind of go in the same circles and him being transient, maybe he has stayed at this person's place before, that could be a possibility when you start stringing together things that people know. But that's why they reached a lot of dead ends. A lot of the people they were seeking, it's like, yeah, this person's an offender, but that's not their MO per se.
Yeah.
Right.
So it becomes very hard. That's why I believe she was taken and that person got the hell out of Dodge, like made a beeline wherever they were going. And as you know, time and distance do not work well together.
Well, and European borders are a factor here too, because for people in the EU being as it is, particularly if a person's transient and doesn't carry the proper paperwork anyway, the borders are very porous.
Yes.
But the flip side of that is that although the borders are porous and people can come and go, yet there's still jurisdictional issues when it comes to say police and things like that. So it's that I think that contributes to the complicates the case as well. I mean, Portugal is only bordered by Spain and then by water, but it would be easy for this guy to disappear and even stay in the same country.
Even though it was 2007, the lack of security, I can understand CCTV wasn't all over the place like it kind of is now, but the lack of cameras in that type of resort was also a little staggering for me too.
Well, I have not visited Portugal, but I don't mean to say this in a bad way about them, but it is not exactly the richest country in Europe, and so that may, although it'd be different now, even in poorer countries. Mm-hmm. Kind of address your question about why aren't there more cameras in place?
Well, the reason why I said that because I knew what the state of Portugal at that time. Even when you go to places like people think of Jamaica, we only know the resorts. We don't go into Jamaica, right? But normally, even in these places of these countries that may not be, rolling in the dough, when you have these villas and these places where people with the money tend to go, it's usually a little more secure, and that's goes back to Stacy's false sense of security. If you've ever been to Jamaica, you feel a certain sense of security at the resort that you don't feel when you're actually in Jamaica.
Especially the big cities, It's like Kingston,
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing here. Not to poke on other countries. It's the same thing here. Go to Miami. I'm from Miami. You go to certain places that are affluent, you're going to feel a false sense of security. And if you go across the street to somewhere else, you're not going to feel that. So people do get the point where they let their guards down. And that's why I gave that public service announcement in the beginning. Because I don't know how many times I've been on vacation and I'm like, whose 7-year-old is wandering around the lobby by themselves? Whose kid is this?
There was some speculation that Madeleine left the room, but if that had been the case, she would have been found.
No, she was. I can't say this for sure. Obviously, it's psychic guidance. There's no fact here. It's just what I'm receiving. I'm feeling like the parents may have given her a bit of cough medicine before she went to bed. Like, hey, we're going
That's
to
what
be out and we're going to check in on you guys, but we want you guys all to be kind of chill. So everyone just needs to go to bed, and let's give you something that's going to kind of help you to sleep a little bit. I mean,
let me jump back in this and piggyback on that. Something I said earlier, I didn't follow up on though. The Portuguese police believe, I think falsely, erroneously, that something like that happened, but that she may have died. That may have been the accident, that she OD'd on some kind of medicine. But most likely, even though what you say may have been true as far as, the children were medicated somehow to keep them asleep, very extremely unlikely that that's what killed her though.
oh yeah, no, I don't get that at all. I don't
But
feel
they
that
believe that was, in fact, they pretty much closed the case. When I say close the case, but they came to that conclusion. That's what happened. That she died of an accident in the room, perhaps because of an OD of some sort of medicine, and the parents were covering it up. But with respect to
no.
the Portugal police, I don't buy that.
No, not even a little bit. And I will tell you that I do feel, like I said, he went 3 blocks, he got into a car, went to whatever place with this kind of root cellar kind of thing. And again, I'm getting the number 3. So feeling like he was there for about 3 hours, and then he bundled her up, and I see them getting back in the car and sort of disappearing.
Hey,
So
that three you're getting could be 3 darn minutes, because I feel like he took her in. Jetta and Stacy, you've never seen this, so this is the resort that they stayed right here.
okay.
And I wish I would have had an arrow, but they were in one of these rooms where the sliding door faces the ocean. And then also, this was an artist's rendition from the lady who described, I'm sorry, the witness who described seeing the male carrying. It wasn't a hooded description. This was an artist renditioning of what
I've seen
that person actually saw. So you see a person walking, and this is the part that bothers me. Like you say, you wish they would have told. Now, look, could have been a guy carrying his child, whatever, but I feel like if that was some guy carrying his child, he would have seen this coverage and come forward and say, no, that was me, and here's my
Yeah,
kid.
I'm looking at the picture and I want to
I
vomit.
I would I've never seen a parent carry their kid this way. If this is actually what the witness saw, but me and Mark, we can sit here all day telling you about eyewitness testimony.
Yeah.
Sure.
But,
No, I look at that picture and I want to vomit. I know that's her, and that's her kidnapper. And the kidnapper was not connected to the family. The kidnapper saw her on the beach a couple of days prior, picked her out, and decided, I'm going to see how I can take her. I want her. And, did the research, watched the family, just kind of paid attention to what was going on, and took advantage of the opportunity to take her 2 days later.
But it's a tough case, really. They all are, but that's just and I think about the family. This is 19 years later, and not only they've lost their daughter, but they also don't have closure.
Yeah. Oh, it's awful. I can't even
It'd be
fathom
bad
that.
enough if you knew the child was deceased, but to always be wondering
Yeah.
and not have any kind of closure on it is got to be is unbelievable.
well, I still
And
want
the
to
mind goes into the worst places too. You know what I mean? Like your brain just goes into so many places. I
Absolutely.
can't even imagine.
I also want to give what part would make people speculative was they brought in cadaver dogs, and they brought the cadaver dogs into apartment 5A, and the dogs immediately went behind the sofa. And now cadaver dogs, if people don't know, they're only trained to alert at the smell of deceased humans or
Right.
organs.
Decay.
So we made an alert there behind the couch. Both dogs alerted behind the sofa in living room 5A, and Eddie gave an alert, which is one of the dogs, near the wardrobe in the main bedroom. There were no alerts on the beach or wasteland. Okay, the PJ obtained warrants to search the house the McCanns had rented, and the couple hired 24 days after. So the dogs did give sense. So that's why police thought that the death occurred in the actual apartment and not somewhere. But then someone also says, hell, maybe someone else could have been, and I'm not saying that to be funny.
I was just going to say someone else could have been killed who, or died, just died in the apartment, and we don't know about it. Yeah, because it's a resort. So, thousands of people have stayed in that room.
Yeah. And then they took hair and fibers from the area. But the thing is, here's the thing about being at a resort or hotel. Yeah, they clean those things, but you can still find a fiber and a hair from somebody that stayed there a year ago. It's not like your home where you know every visitor that's been in that home. So it's like you said, it's just a bunch of things that complicate things. And that's why you get 3 views today. You've got a criminal view, you've got a psychic view, and you've got a guy sitting on the couch view. That's me, not Mark, everybody.
I'm sitting on a bed, same thing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say he's on a bed, so
Yeah, but
Uh,
he's got a lot
yeah,
more forensic knowledge than I do.
no. Something else worth note, though. No, I really don't. I'm not just poor mouthing, but is that again the British Portuguese conflict here? It wasn't just. It was partly these things kind of get personal. Hey, those guys think they're better than us. We think they're a bunch of savages. That type of thing. But the Portuguese legal system, in the eyes of the British investigators, the Portuguese legal system got in the way because they had to jump through so many more hoops than British investigators would in order to get search warrants and things of that nature. The Portuguese authorities were also criticized for not kind of putting out what we would call a nationwide alert. And of course, Portugal was a much smaller country. They didn't put out a nationwide alert of sorts until about 5 hours after she disappeared. And the Interpol office that would put out a worldwide alert wasn't notified until about 8 hours after she disappeared. But it may have been a moot point by that time. Keone is like the Amber Alert thing we talk about. Unfortunately, sometimes by the time the Amber Alert gets out, and if it really is an abduction by a stranger, it's too late already. But
yeah, so
again,
much time has
pure
passed.
speculation.
For you, Stacy, you kept saying the number 17, right?
Yes.
On August 4th, Portugal's police released 17 case files containing 11,233 pages of evidence.
Mhm.
There's your 17 and there's your 3.
Wow, that's interesting. I still feel like that 17 is like something that he connects to, something that he personally identifies with, something with that 17. I do feel it'll come out. I do feel that this will be resolved. It might be like a deathbed confession or somebody in jail wanting, to get out of jail, here's something. I do feel that this will be resolved, but it won't be resolved
I
for
would
some.
hope so because there's so many people that go to their grave and take this information with
Yeah.
them, and just
Yeah,
so
I
many
know.
cold cases. But this is also, it's hard to talk about and cover because, especially now today, you mention someone as being a suspect in something, and then you're liable for lawsuits. So,
Oh yeah.
it's a very hard thing to talk about, and that's why everybody, we cover it.
Yes.
We are not the field matter experts on these things. These are just things that
No.
we
Like
cover.
I said, this is psychic guidance. It's neither true nor false. It just is information that I'm getting. Take what works for you, leave the rest behind. I could be right, I could be wrong. It's just what I receive. Yeah.
Yeah, the only people who have benefited from this case are lawyers who have
Yeah.
represented people in court for libel.
Yeah, because there's nothing else. I mean, the parents have gone through hell. They live in their own personal hell. There's been no resolve, and everybody else is making money, but
This
the
is
poor kid is still not, not here.
That's one thing before we wrap up to what Mark said earlier. What you just said is we see these cases of where people lose a child and it's like 2 years later and they're, out having the time of their life. And then you see these parents were, 8 years later, they still haven't picked up the pieces. And
Yeah.
we get it. Everybody grieves differently. I'm not saying that everybody grieves differently, but it just, it just makes you wonder with some cases. Some people
Yeah.
move on and some people do not.
Yeah, it's very, very sad. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for coming on and for us to kind of have this discussion. I really felt like there was stuff bubbling from under the surface for me that I wanted to just kind of
I'm
throw out
sorry.
there. And
There's one thing I wanted to add so we know this is back in 2007. So Mark, I don't know if you mentioned it because you were talking about the German investigation. So in 2020 and then again in 2025, German prosecutors stated that they have concrete evidence
Yeah.
that Christian, did you touch on that?
Not in detail, but I did have read the Germans are almost sure this is the guy.
Yes. So they
I
said that
can't
they
read more
have,
detail on what they know, but they're almost sure this is the guy.
I'm going to tell you the hang
there's
up.
some kind of biological something that they have. There's a biological.
Well, I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to tell you. So they say they have concrete evidence that Christian Buckner killed McCain. However, the formal charges against Buckner by the court have been delayed due to confusion over where his last address in Germany and was thus which German courts is responsible for the trial. And that's one of the things you were saying. That's the problem with transient people,
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was, unlike what we talked about, people's MOs don't change. Him out of all the accusers were the one where that age range was prevalent.
Yeah. I feel very strongly it's him. I feel very, very strongly it's him. Sickly so. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark. This was great. What a sad case. I hope that we do in our lifetimes find out what really happened and that there is some resolve for the family. Just an awful experience. And thank you, Keone, for popping in and being our fabulous producer. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Check out Mark's channel, Crime Chronicles. Like, subscribe, click the bell on his stuff. He's releasing stuff all the time. You can like, subscribe, and click the bell on my channel as well, The Black Feather Intuitive. And until we see you for another Crime Chronicles crossover with The Black Feather Intuitive, we will see you guys next time. Take care and be well.
Best.